Twilight Gets a Puppy. By TDR. Chapter 22. Friendship is Puppies. Part 6. Ross and Spike were rather surprised at the round of introductions. It seemed that Pinkie Pie had not been lying when she said she knew every pony in Ponyville. Ross couldn't wrap his head around half the names that she had given in her rapid-fire introductions. It also became clear that Pinkie Pie really hadn't meant to upset Twilight, given that the mare apologized for it every few minutes. Throwing parties was just something she did, and everyone got a welcome to Ponyville party. Spike assured her that Twilight would be fine once she calmed down, and the party mare seemed to take that to heart. With one final apology, she darted off into the crowd and was last seen trying to get a game of pin the tail on the pony going. There was another thing that surprised Ross. Aside from a few foals running around, all of the ponies present were adults, yet he hadn't caught the first whiff of alcohol at all. On one paw, that meant that Pinkie Pie was responsible enough to know foals and underage ponies were here. On the other paw, a possible explanation for the pink pony's antics was out the window. The mare was everywhere and acted like she knew every pony. Ross gave up trying to follow her after a few moments. She didn't smell like magic, and yet she was seemingly bending reality to her whims like a Ekkas class mage. Twilight was going to have a field day studying her if she ever found out about her quirks. Spike had found Apple Bloom again and was talking with her and a few other foals that came over to gawk at the dragon. That was a nice change. Spike didn't really have a chance to make friends with anyone his age back in Canterlot. Between the private tutoring and most parents worrying about his claws and fire breath, he didn't meet any. There were a few in Canterlot that would allow their children anywhere near him in truth. Ross only hoped Spike could keep his snark in check. That forked tongue of his could be quite barbed when he chose. Ross was more worried about Twilight right now, but he knew going to talk to her wouldn't do much good. She needed some alone time and a nap before she would be able to deal with other ponies again. Still, that left him without a translator. Maybe he should break out the notebook again, or perhaps he should just get a big glass of water and... "Excuse me." Ross's ears perked up as he heard a voice behind him. He turned back to look and immediately flattened his ears to his skull, seeing the white unicorn mare that had put him in a foul mood earlier had shown up again. "Bork." Ross grumbled. "Ross. That is not nice," another voice, much quieter, stated. "I mean, she is flexible, but I don't think any pony is flexible enough to do that." Ross blinked, noting that Fluttershy had walked up with Rarity and was sitting behind her, gesturing to the white unicorn with a wing. "Bark?" Ross questioned. "Please just listen to her," Fluttershy asked. Ross looked back at Rarity. He rolled his eyes and let out a long sigh. He rather wanted to just storm off again, but Fluttershy was there and he didn't want to upset the Pegasus mare by telling her friend to piss off. He turned his attention fully to Rarity. At the very least he would be willing to let her speak her piece just to see how far she'd stick her hoof in her mouth this time. Yes. First off, I would like to apologize for my earlier behavior. It was uncouth and not befitting for a lady to have reduced herself to such things. I would also like to greatly apologize for striking you with the broom and to any insult I may have directed towards your family." Rarity quickly let out. Her words seemed rather brisk, as though they were stunted, like she had a much larger and more flowery prose she wished to say and then scraped it all before opening her mouth. "While I suppose I could defend myself by pointing out your close resemblance to a diamond dog, I shall not do so, as trying to defend my unwarranted actions will simply cheapen my attempt to apologize. I fully admit I was in the wrong and I let my emotions get the best of me in our first encounter. I also apologize for not noticing you until the end. I have a tendency to get quite focused and ignore everything else." Ross tilted his head, glancing over to Fluttershy briefly. "Bark?" Ross asked. Fluttershy shook her head, indicating that she had nothing to do with Rarity's apology. Ross looked back at Rarity, who was looking up at him with the sort of eyes that would make a stallion melt into a blubbering mess. Unfortunately for her, that sort of look meant nothing to Ross. He wasn't interested in ponies in that way at all. Sure, he knew a pretty pony or a cute one when he saw them, but there was no romantic or amorous attraction attached. Spike fell in and out of love at the drop of a hat. Ross had never really cared. Best he could figure out it had to do with their scent. His brain told him they were prey, not partners, and it was something he had not really tried to ever get past. Ross's impassive reaction to her batting her eyes did not go unnoticed, however. Nothing? Not even a little bit? Rarity gasped, rearing up onto her hind legs with one foreleg to her head and toppled over backwards. Ross took a step forward to catch her out of instinct, only to stop as she collapsed onto a red couch that hadn't been there before. "Ah no," Rarity whined, not even a flicker of interest. "That's it, my time is done, I've gotten old." Rarity continued to wail. Ross blinked, looking around, seeing that everyone but Fluttershy was ignoring the mare's antics. "I should just hang it all up and get a dozen cats." Fluttershy spoke up. "Oh, that's wonderful, Rarity, I have a number of little kittens." "Hold that thought, dear," Rarity told the butter yellow Pegasus, as she suddenly sat up for a second. With Fluttershy paused, she fell back onto the couch with a wail, racked with sobs. "My charm is gone, I'm hideous." Ross simply stared at the scene before him as the white mare continued to debase herself in the crowd as she carried on. It was clearly fake, but he couldn't help to be amused at the emotion she put into the part she was playing, fake or not. As she was on the third verse of lamenting the loss of her youthful beauty, Ross couldn't help but to start clapping at the scene. Rarity paused a moment before sitting up on her couch with a small smile. "Not buying it, Rarity asked. Ross shook his head. "Woof. He says it was a nice effort, it was easily on par with Princess's rant in the last showing of Sweet Bird of Youth." Fluttershy explained. "Really? I was going more for a Scarlet." Rarity pouted. "Bark." Ross chuckled. "He said you didn't have enough of a country twang for Scarlet." Fluttershy smirked. "Everyone's a critic," Rarity bemoaned, getting a small chuckle from Ross. "Still, that does bring me back to the point at hoof as to whether or not you accept my apology for my actions before. In short, I apologize for calling you a mongrel, and insinuating you were infested with fleas. I know I cannot exactly expect it, but I am sorry about getting carried away like that, and I do beseech your forgiveness for that. I am hardly showing myself in the best light with all this." Ross raised an eyebrow. "Woof. He said you didn't say anything about the insult to his fashion sense." Fluttershy explained. "Yes, well, out of everything I said, that was the one part I am not going to apologize for. Honestly, maroon and tan with navy blue fur? It clashes horridly. It's like if I tried to wear bright green. It really won't do." Rarity continued. "Woof?" Ross questioned. "He said he doesn't see what's wrong with it." Fluttershy passed along. "Ross, I think she means the colors more than the style." Ross's ears perked up at that as he looked down at his clothing. Unlike normal cats and dogs, he could see in the same spectrum of colors as ponies. He just didn't see anything wrong with the maroon duster and his tan pants. "Yes, I suppose the style is fine. It's not elegant, but it clearly has function with all the pockets." Rarity considered rubbing her chin with a hoof. "Ooh, idea. How about I fix something up for you? I've never actually made anything for one of your build before, and I can play with the colors a bit." Ross raised an eyebrow. "Woof?" he said. Fluttershy began. "I understand a refusal when I hear one, dear, no worries. It shalln't cost you anything, and if anything I will consider it a continuation of my apology. Not to say I will not benefit a bit from working on something new, but the offer still stands. I will simply need to take measurements when you are able. While I doubt any of this will make us friends, I would at least hope that I can lessen any hard feelings you and your siblings may have towards me." "Bark," Ross responded. "He said he is willing to accept your apology, but he can't speak for the others. He also somewhat suspects that this is only forthcoming because he expects you want to remain in the good graces of a Canterlot family," Fluttershy stated. While I cannot deny the thought crossed my mind that is not the case. My actions show I am clearly not ready for that place and I shan't bring it up again. Rarity sighed. Ross snorted, she was closer to fitting into the Canterlot elite than he was willing to admit. I take it that's a no. Rarity frowned. Woof. Ross shook his head before an idea came to mind. Bark. No, he says you're fine and he's still willing to accept though he does have a request. Fluttershy tilted her head. He said make a small ball of magic and float it in the air. Ross nodded as Rarity looked confused. Still she did as he asked and a light blue orb formed in the air. Ross regarded it for a moment before snapping it out of the air with a quick bite. Both Rarity and Fluttershy shrieked at the action with the Pegasus freezing in place and the white unicorn falling back on her couch rubbing her horn. Oh, I've been killed. Rarity bemoaned as Ross considered the flavor. Marshmallow. Fluttershy blinked. What just happened? Rarity cried out. Bark. Ross asked Fluttershy. Yes, I'm fine, just a bit startled. Fluttershy admitted. Yes, a little warning before doing that again. Rarity grumbled. What was that anyway? Oh, moon dogs eat magic. I think he was just seeing what flavor yours was. Fluttershy stated as Ross nodded. And my magic tastes like marshmallows. Rarity asked as Ross nodded. I don't know how I feel about that. Asterisk. All the ponies in this town are crazy. Twilight swore as she buried her head under her pillow. She had gotten a bit of sleep before a cheer from the downstairs library woke her up again. She hadn't realized that she was even as tired as she was. Still, given she had flown down from Canterlot that morning and had been running around all day. A brief glance to a clock on the wall showed it was well after midnight and closer to the sunrise than she liked. She knew most ponies would be staying up as late as they could in order to watch the princess raise the sun, though Twilight was far more worried about the possibility of yesterday being the last day Equestria would ever see. Twilight grumbled, rolling onto her back, letting out a low sigh as she tried to work out her frustrations of the day. More sleep wasn't going to happen anytime soon. And here I thought I would have had some time to study more about the elements of harmony. Twilight sighed. I can't even go downstairs to look at the books without the possibility of getting mobbed and sidetracked again. Twilight sighed, rolling over onto her belly and climbing out of bed. She gathered up the one book she had brought with her, rereading the lines by the light of the moon as she moved to the window. Legend has it that on the longest day of the 1000th year, the stars shall aid in her escape and she shall bring about nighttime eternal. Twilight grumbled, looking up at the moon and the glimmering stars filling the sky. Was it just her, or were a quartet of those stars closer to the moon than they had been before? I hope the princess was right. I really hope this is just an old pony tale, Twilight muttered. The door opened and Spike poked his head in. Twilight blinked, noting that the little dragon had a lampshade on his head for some reason, and she wisely decided to ignore it. Twilight, it's about time for the sunrise. You gonna be okay to join us over at Town Hall? Spike questioned. She considered it for a moment and let out a small sigh. She still felt tired, but what sleep she had gotten had helped. Really, the day hadn't been that bad. She was still annoyed at Rarity and Pinkie Pie, and maybe a little bit at Rainbow Dash, but her earlier crabbiness was mostly gone. Sure. Spike. Twilight yawned. See if you can track down some coffee for me, would you? No problem. Oh, and avoid the red bottles on the drink table. Pinkie Pie has a few bottles of hot sauce up there that look like cherry juice. Seriously. Yeah, Mare likes it on cupcakes. She's a weird one, but alright if you can get past the oddities. Spike stated. You should talk to her before we leave, she seems rather sorry about surprising you. We'll see. Coffee first. Twilight stated. I'll see what I can find and I'll let Ross know you're up. Spike agreed, stepping back out of the room. Asterisk. Twilight sighed, looking around at the gathered crowd. Ross stood next to her, garnering a few odd looks from those who had not made it to Pinkie Pie's party, though for the most part they let him be. Spike was still hanging out with Apple Bloom and the pair of them seemed super excited over everything. Apple Bloom was currently reintroducing the dragon to the food her family brought. Twilight was rather glad her younger brother was making friends. There were issues with that back in Canterlot. Ross was explaining to her about his encounter with Rarity. Twilight was only half listening. It was less than 10 minutes until Princess Celestia was supposed to raise the sun and no one had seen her for long after her chariot had landed. In fact, aside from the 2 guards that had pulled Twilight's chariot, no one had seen another royal guard at all. So she's going to make you a new outfit and you're fine with her now? Twilight questioned. Woof. Ross shrugged. Yes, well I suppose she did apologize, that's a start. I guess she's going to try and apologize to Spike and I too. Twilight theorized as Ross nodded. Alright, well if you're fine with her after all that I suppose I can let it slide. Still it makes me wonder what kind of trouble could she have had with Diamond Dogs for that sort of reaction. Talking about Rarity? Pinkie Pie asked suddenly from right next to them, making both Twilight and Ross jump back in surprise. Pinkie Pie ignored the shock and continued to talk, though her tone was a little subdued. Rarity's had some bad encounters with the packs around town. The 2 packs here are way worse than the ones near where I used to live, but they tend to leave the town alone for the most part. I didn't realize that the Diamond Dogs were such a big problem out here. Twilight considered. So long as you stay in town or near the farms there's not much issue. At least not now. Pinkie Pie's hair deflated a little as she looked over at Applejack briefly. Woof. Ross asked. Not my place to say. Pinkie explained before turning to Twilight. Anyway, I am super sorry about startling you like that earlier. I didn't think anyone was afraid of parties or would get that upset. I was throwing a surprise welcome to Ponyville party. I didn't mean to upset you or anything. Please don't be mad. Twilight and Ross both jumped back again as a veritable torrent of water flooded from the bawling pink pony's eyes. Geez, it's okay, calm down. You didn't know, I forgive you, just calm down, Twilight tried to placate. Okay. Pinkie Pie popped up again, her hair exploding back into the poofy curls, her tears drying up as if they never were there. She grabbed Twilight in a bone-creaking hug before letting her go with a wide grin. I'm glad everything's okay again. I'm super excited for this party. Are you excited? I've never been so excited. Pinkie stopped her rambling as a fanfare of birdsong sounded. The crowd of ponies went silent as they all looked up at the second floor of the town hall where Rarity stood by a curtained-off area, ready to pull the cord to reveal the princess. Fluttershy smiled as she guided her birds to sing, announcing the reveal. A spotlight shined down to just under the curtained-off balcony area where Mayor Mare stood ready for a speech. Fillies and gentle colts, as Mayor of Ponyville, it is my pleasure to announce the beginning of the Summer Sun celebration. She called out, her voice carrying over the crowd, only to be drowned out by the thunder of stomping hooves and cheering. After waiting for the cheering to die down, the mayor spoke again. In just a few moments, our town will witness the magic of the sunrise and celebrate this, the longest day of the year. The mayor took a bit of a pause. Twilight glanced back and noticed Ross was headed off towards the back rather quickly, likely having to use the little colt's room. She was upset for a moment, before realizing that she and Ross could pretty much see the princess almost any time they wanted. This really wasn't a big deal to either of them. And now it is my great honor to introduce you to the ruler of our land. The mayor continued. Twilight glanced to the sky with a worried expression, seeing the moon through the great glass windows at the top of the town hall. The stars she thought were closer before were gone and the image of the mayor on the moon seemed to vanish. The very pony who gives us the sun and the moon each and every day, the good, the wise, the bringer of harmony to all of Equestria. The mayor continued. Fluttershy gestured for her birds to ready the fanfare. Pinkie Pie vibrated in place. Rarity readied herself to pull the cord. Applejack offered a slice of cake to a pony. Spike and Apple Bloom looked up at the upper balcony with excitement. Rainbow Dash devoured said cake slice. Twilight fretted about what might happen. Ross froze in place where he was about to exit the little colt's room, a shudder running along his spine. Princess Celestia. The curtain was yanked back and the spotlight moved to the upper balcony to reveal nothing. Ponies around her started yammering in shock as Rarity poked her head behind the curtain looking for the princess. This can't be good. Twilight muttered, drawing Pinkie Pie's attention. Be calm every pony, there must be a reasonable explanation. Mare placated. Ooh, ah, I love guessing games. Pinkie Pie chimed up as she looked around. Is she hiding? She's gone. Rarity called down as all the others gasped in shock. Ooh, she's good. Pinkie Pie admitted, looking up at the balcony before screaming out. Her cry started other panicked sounds from the crowd as a dark purplish mist began to form, billowing over the balcony. There were a few screams and some shrieking as the mist took the form of a towering black alicorn with metallic blue armor. Her mane and tail swirled around her like an unbound miasma of partially stars and mostly void. Her teal eyes were slitted like a cat's as she stared down at the gathered ponies, most of them too much in shock at the appearance of the dark mare to even move. Oh my beloved subjects! It's been so long since I've seen your precious little sun-loving faces, the mare sneered, glaring down at them all. What did you do with our princess? Rainbow Dash shouted, launching into the air only for Applejack to grab her tail. Twilight glanced around the room, not seeing Ross though. Spike was standing in front of a number of foals who had huddled under the table, an angry look on his face as he glared up at the dark alicorn. Why? Am I not royal enough for you? The mare chuckled. Her laughter cut off for a moment as she looked to the back of the crowd curiously, her ears perked. Glancing back, Twilight caught a glimpse of Ross being shoved back into the bathroom as a herd of ponies pushed into the little colt's room trying to get away. Don't you know who I am? The mare asked, looking back over the crowd, ignoring the minor stampede. Ooh, more guessing games. Hokey smokes? No, Queen Meanie. Oh, I got it, Black Snooty, that's it's Black Snooty. Pinkie Pie guessed. Any further guesses cut off as Applejack shoved a large cupcake in the jabbering mare's mouth to shut her up. Does my crown no longer count now that I've been imprisoned for 1,000 years? The mare snarled, glaring at Fluttershy and sending her birds flying away in terror as the Pegasus flinched and whimpered. She whirled on Rarity, catching the mare's chin with the miasma of her mane. Did you not recall the legends? Did you not see the signs? She growled, popping the white unicorn on the chin with her mane. I did. Twilight called out. And I know who you are. You're the mare in the moon. The dark alicorn grinned, showing Rarity some rather impressively sharp teeth as she turned to look down at Twilight. There were a number of shrieks and cries of panic from the back of the building as Ross tried to shove ponies out of his way, or failing that tossing them, to get out and stop Twilight from drawing more attention to herself. He was unfortunately making little to no progress out of the bathroom. The air was filled with magic and it made his fur stand on end. Nightmare Moon! Twilight declared with a growl. Well. Some pony who remembers me. Nightmare Moon smiled. Then you also know why I'm here. You're here too. Twilight flinched, noting everyone else staring at her. Remember this day, my little ponies, for it was your last. Nightmare Moon cackled. From this moment forth, the night will last forever. The dark alicorn's shout brought a boom of thunder and the flash of lightning across the top of the room, sending a number of Pegasi who had been in the air diving for cover. Her mane started to move, forming a swirling vortex of dark void above her, filling the top of the town hall with darkness as her laughter echoed through the building. Author's note: Holy flip Batman, this first episode took way longer than I expected. Still, we are now ready to start episode 2 before long. No idea how long this will take. This is also where T-Gap really goes into AU territory. The world itself has changed due to the introduction of the witch wolves. How, you might ask? Well, that will be revealed later. End author's note. End chapter 22. Friendship is Puppies. Part 6.